Hi, welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Danny Peyronel, rock singer, songwriter, keyboard player, producer, probably best known for his time in Heavy Metal Kids and UFO, but there's so much more to Danny than those two bands. And before I move on to UFO, Danny, I'd like to actually roll back a little bit because you started off learning to play the piano and become a composer and went to the Juilliard School of Music.
Yeah, only for a year.
Only for a year, yeah, but that's prestigious music school, nevertheless.
Sure.
Yeah. So from that, you connected the dots and went and got into rock music. How did that come about?
I always wanted to get into rock music professionally. But in fact, I have interesting memories of Juilliard because I had a friend who's sadly, as so many now, not with us anymore, who was a really tremendous boogie-woogie piano player and Hammond player.
Yes.
I looked up to him. I mean, he really was way up there. And he was also doing some stuff in Juilliard. And they had on the fourth floor, they had the rehearsal rooms. And every rehearsal room had a Steinway grand piano.
Wow.
And some had two, you see.
Wow.
Yeah, about 8 or 12 had two. I mean, that's how well this place was, from donors and and Bobby Blaine, that was his name, Bobby Blaine, and myself, we used to get into one of the two Steinway rooms and play boogie woogie piano with two pianos. And it was so exciting. And I remember the first time we did it, when we finished, it was all really wonderful stuff. When we finished, we opened the door and there were other Juilliard classic kids, because it's basically a classical music.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Lining the hallway outside, listening to us playing boogie woogie, which was such fun. But I always knew that I wanted to be in rock, to have a life in rock music.
Yeah.
But it was during that year that these friends of mine said, what you want to do is you want to go to London. That's where you want to go. New York was very cold for getting into any kind of music world, playing, and it was very, very cold, very business-like, and I had no idea where to even start. Luckily, I was at school, so it wasn't a desperate thing. But whereas in London, I arrived there on a Monday. I knew one guy who I'd been to elementary school with. So years I hadn't seen him. He was also Italian, Argentine like me. And he let me crash in his place in Chelsea. And he knew one girl, this Italian countess, whose boyfriend was a bass player in a professional band, you see. And he introduced me to the countess, and she called this guy at rehearsals. And I can just imagine the guy must have thought, who am I going to be talking to here? She'd tell her, this kid's here, And but the guy was really nice, a bass player. And he said, listen, we're auditioning guitarists, really. We're a rhythm section. We're the remains of a band that just had a semi-hit single. And we're auditioning guitarists. There's a keyboard here. If you want to come round tomorrow and help us out, that'd be great. So this was the Thursday of the Monday I arrived. Wow. I went around the Friday. I jammed with them a little bit. And 15 minutes later, they said, if you want the job, it's yours. I know. I mean, you had other kids in Britain, of course, trying for years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, paying their dues. Yeah,
I know. This was a band with wages, with a record contract of sorts still.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It was talk about the right time and the right place. But I fell in love with London instantly, because it was like a village, you know.
Yeah.
Especially that area. I was a Chelsea boy, and everything happened to me there. Everything. I met my girl, whom I'm still with.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and our boy was born there, and everything
Oh,
happened.
brilliant.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that band the Heavy Metal Kids, was it?
No, that was pre-Heavy Metal Kids. That band was called the Rats, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you'll know some references because before that they were called Streak, right?
Right,
And
yeah.
there was still a three-piece with a guitarist called Jake Hooker, an American guitarist, and they had a bit of a hit, and then they split up as bands did in those days.
Yeah.
And then the drummer, who was a dear friend of mine, also on Paul Vardy, the drummer and the bass player wanted to carry on, and so on. So this is how the Rats were. The drummer, Paul, after that went on to form a band called the Arrows.
I remember. Yeah, the Arrows. Yeah.
So the Arrows was Paul again with that Jake, right?
Yeah.
And with Alan Merrill. This is how things were. With Alan Merrill, who also incredibly in the COVID time left us.
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
Really talented bass player, guitarist, and who was Laura Nyro's nephew, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how everyone was so connected.
I know. And I'm sure you remember that they wrote "I Love Rock and Roll."
Yeah. Which was a hit for several people afterwards.
Yeah.
Ace Frehley and yeah.
Loads of people had hits with that. So
well.
that was the beginning, and we rehearsed in a place called the Tunnel in South London, and so did the Heavy Metal Kids, you see. And then we opened for the Kids one night at the Marquee, and so again I was at the right in the right place at the right time when suddenly they thought, we got to get a keyboard player. And Robin, the guy who ran the rehearsal studio, said to Mickey, the guitarist, you want to get Danny, from the Rats. And Mickey goes, Danny? Yeah, they opened for you. And he didn't remember me at all, right?
Yeah.
But he said, oh, yeah, Danny's great. Call him up. And suddenly I'm in the Heavy Metal Kids, which I looked up to too. They had a really slick, good show together, and I thought they were cool. So that was
because although they were called the Heavy Metal Kids, they weren't really heavy metal, were they? They weren't
not at all.
But part street urchin, part advanced punk band, really.
Yeah, absolutely, the right description. And if anything, we were closer to Faces, Stones, thing, but with a more theatrical, even humorous thing, show that we had because of Gary.
Yeah, because he was quite a character, wasn't he?
Oh, tremendous. And we were really good friends, him and I. In fact, I met my lady because of Gary. It was really, really great fun. See, heavy metal wasn't really a thing at that time.
No, I agree. It wasn't.
This is pre-heavy metal,
just hard rock, wasn't it?
We chose the name Heavy Metal Kids because of a William Burroughs book. They were a gang of, I believe they were a gang of gay junkie boys, or something like this, and the Heavy Metal Kids. He was responsible for many names, by the way, William Burroughs, but Steely Dan as well.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that's what. And when we went to the States on tour, the record company in the American side, we were with Atlantic. So the American parent company said, "Oh no, we got to do something about the name because the heavy metal part, some record chains and Walmart and all that may not carry the record. That's a bad connotation."
It's true.
I mean, how young and influential were we that we went with that? You know, so we dropped the heavy metal that was called The Kids. It was just stupid. We should have just said, "No,
It's who we are." Yeah,
we don't care."
yeah. You made two albums with them, didn't you?
Yeah.
Heavy Metal Kids and Anvil Chorus.
Yeah.
Were you writing then as well? Were you kind of? Yeah.
Straight away, I was writing. Ronnie, the bass player, and myself were a writing unit.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary sometimes also contributed with and stuff. And then there was the other side, which is more Mickey, which was what they already had, kind of thing. So when I joined, Ronnie and I started becoming more and more the songwriting part, and the second one is mostly Ronnie and I, with Gary getting in there as usual. But it was I learned a lot from Ronnie Thomas, who was the bass player. You know, he was a great songwriter, and I really picked up a lot from him.
Yeah, I think Cherry Red Records in the new year are releasing a little box set of Heavy Metal Kids albums.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So for anyone watching and reading and viewing this, you'll be able to find out yourself what the band's like. So the albums are coming back into print now. At the end of 75, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on the timings, but obviously you then bumped into or members of UFO, because it's 1976, or you with UFO for No Heavy Petting. So how did you go from the Heavy Metal Kids to UFO? How did that happen?
It goes back again to Paul. You know, it all goes back round.
Yeah.
Paul, who, like I say, was a really dear friend. He always used to go on about Pete this
Big
and
way,
and his mates UFO, you know. And when we were on tour of the States in 75 with the Kids, which must have been about March or April, something like that. I remember seeing them on Don Kirshner's in concert in the hotel. Yeah. I remember saying to the guys, these are Paul's mates, you know, UFO and so on. Yeah. And so, and bizarrely, when we got back to London, literally like a day or two after I got back, the doorbell goes in our tiny flat in Chelsea, and it was Paul, and he says, "Hey, Danny, I'm here with my mate Pete," you know. So they come up and he introduced me to Pete, and then I asked Pete over to a gig at the Roundhouse that we did, and he asked me to a UFO thing. He said, and I'm pretty sure that he said, you know, on the next album it'd be great if you do some keys or something like that. I said, great. And then this has got to be just before the Reading Festival.
Yeah, because that was your stage debut, wasn't it? The Reading Festival with them, is that right?
Yes. So just before the Reading Festival, we had done a tour of France with the Kids, and we had done the typical mistake that so many bands make, where we had a lineup that really worked, and sure, some were better than others as musicians, but we were very young, you know, and also some of us weren't as reliable or whatever. So for one reason or the other, we felt we had to change the guitarist, which is, in my opinion, a terrible idea, because Mickey was really the Heavy Metal Kids, him and Gary, you know. So we changed the guitarist, and we couldn't find a really right guy, and in the end we went with somebody who was a friend of a friend, you know, the kind of thing.
I know.
In fact, he had been in the band before me, the second guitarist, for 2 seconds, you know. For 2 minutes he'd been in the band, and he had, you know, he was asked to leave and so on. And then they got Barry Paul, who was a great guitarist. Anyway, so, and then when Barry left, that's when I joined. Anyway, so things, this guy really wasn't into what the band was about. this guy thought the band should be Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
or Black Sabbath, more Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Really, really straightforward,
Yeah.
heavy metal type stuff. So there was a little fight within the band and everything. Ronnie was with me, the drummer was with this guy, Gary was on the fence, and, and in the middle of that tour, it became really unpleasant. And I thought, I really don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And I don't want to be a cause of the band disbanding altogether. So I'll tell you what, I'll do the rest of the gigs of this tour. We had some gigs with Uriah Heep, I think, in Britain, in Glasgow, and so on.
Yeah.
To finish this tour, and then I'll go. So the typical thing. Ronnie said, "No, if you're going, I'm going." I said, "Nah, it's fine. I'm going to be fine." And before coming back to Britain, I phoned my girl, and I said, "Could you phone Chrysalis, which is UFO's office, and ask if maybe the boys are on tour in Europe somewhere?" And lo and behold, they were in Germany, as they mostly were in those days. And he had spoken to this lovely girl there. She had spoken to Pete, and Pete had said, "Oh, tell Danny to come and meet. Ask him to drop him off in Cologne." We got a keyboard in the truck, and nobody can play it. And there's a couple of songs that we can't do without the keyboards. So it'd be great to see him. Blah blah. So they drop me off, and they were having a day off, and we just hung out. And in the sound check to the gig, we worked out in the streets. You remember that song?
Yeah. Great song, for course.
You can't do without the piano. It starts.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with the piano. Yeah.
So I learned it right there. This was my thing, by the way, Phil. What I did really well was really learn quickly. I wasn't
your superpower.
Great as a player, but I was very fast.
Picking things up.
Yeah. Second verse, I already knew how it went. So I did that, and then they asked me up for the encore as well, which is "Come On Everybody." I think it was great fun. The place was packed. It was definitely a step up for me. Success wise, So again, in the dressing room, party time, and the boys Phil and Peter saying, "Dan, when we get back,
you're in the band.
It's yours." And I said, "That's great. Sounds wonderful. Let me just get back and do these last gigs with the boys." And then, so I did that. I did the gigs with the boys. And before they got back from Germany, I went to the record company, got all the albums, and learned every song. So we rehearsed. They were like, "Wow."
Fantastic. Because you played the Reading Festival with them, which must have been, that was a big gig, wasn't it? I know UFO was still not as big as they were going to be, but nevertheless, it was a huge step up, wasn't it?
Well, I'd done it the year before. You see, I'd done it the previous year with the Heavy Metal Kids.
Yeah.
And this time, the Heavy Metal Kids were also there, but we were, of course, much higher up in the bill.
Higher up the bill.
And this happened on more than one occasion, because we also did a German festival to warm up for this American tour that we were going on. UFO, as you know, being a reasonably important act at the time in Germany, they took us last minute on 4 or 5 festivals as special guest kind of thing, and it really was great stuff.
Fantastic.
They knew all the tunes, and it was wonderful.
I mean, and No Heavy Petting, that actually is my favorite UFO album.
Wow.
I recently did a video on UFO and said that this was the one that I played the most, and I thought that I'd got into UFO from Fawcett, and then I bought the previous one, and then when this one came out, I just felt everything came together. But they also, when you joined the band at this time, they must have been very open to your compositional and songwriting skills, because you're literally 50% of the songwriting credits, you're on them. And also you wrote some of the songs purely on your own. Were you surprised that they let you just have more of say into that? They weren't like a tight clique. They just said, yeah, what ideas have you got, Danny? And off you went.
I wasn't surprised because I didn't know what the dynamic was before me. You see, for me, it was completely new. They were like really palish, especially with Pete. We were mates. It seemed, and to me, it was a natural state of affairs to join a band and write. I mean, that's kind of what you got when I joined, kind of thing. And they were completely open and welcoming to the songs. Well, one of them, Can You Rhoda, I wrote, although I wrote most of it, it must be said, I wrote it at rehearsals. Andy and I got there early one time for some reason, or probably at the right time, and the others got there late. And before the others arrived, I had this idea, and I said, well, it'd be great with a double bass drum, you see. So we worked it out together, and that's why I gave him the credit afterwards, because the feel worked with a double bass. And then Phil put lyrics on that, which were perfect because it was about a motorbike, Vincent. So it was like that.
It's a fantastic song, that, as well, isn't it? I mean, Michael Schenker's guitar solo and that, it was just like built for him. It's just like lightning fast, and it's an absolutely wonderful song.
Ah, thank you. Well, we did a remake with House of X, which is my present ethereal band, because we are not actually doing anything right now, but we could any moment, with Clive Edwards and Lawrence Archer and Rocky Newton. We did a version of it that's even faster than the original.
Wow.
And Lawrence really rips. I mean, it really is so exciting and suitable for almost anything, that song. But it's difficult to. Clive does a tremendous job because it's a really difficult piece for drummers, Clive Edwards is superb. As you know, he was in UFO too at one point. But it's funny, all these things that you're saying, because I've been doing a few interviews recently because of this release. And the 45th anniversary, which I have to admit, I don't get that. If it was a 50th anniversary, I did one with Howard Johnson the other day, and he was saying exactly what you're saying, that it's his favorite album, and it's the funniest thing with the album, because, as I'm sure you know, after it actually came out, it went through a period when it was, I wouldn't say forgotten, but very much in the background, that album. And in the last, 15, 20 years, it's been growing and growing. And now loads of people think as you do.
They do, because when I did a video on the early UFO albums, the number of people that said, that's my favorite as well. That's my favorite, from all around the world. Very and strange. I just think it's got such a wonderful sense of light and shade and dynamics. It's kind of there's so much mixture on there. But songs like Highway Lady, which is completely yours on your own. But Martian Landscape is so, in a way, untypical of a track to find on a UFO album. And I think it's that mixture of songs that has made it the longevity has really tapped in. The song that I feel I'd like to ask you about was not on the original album, and it's All the Strings, right? Which is an outtake. Is that just you and Phil on your own? Is that? Yeah,
what a shame that Schenker put guitars on it. It would have been huge.
It would have been massive.
We just didn't have time, you know, in the studio or space, I guess, on the album.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been on, obviously.
It would have been. It would have been an epic song, wouldn't it? It just feels like you just think at some point now, just Schenker's going to come in and do one of those melodic solos that builds and builds and builds. But no, it's still
good.
It's still good. It's still good. Yeah. It's still good, and it's still, even if it had just been on there as a track, it still would have worked, because Martian Landscape, which is nothing to do with Mars, is it?
No. it's to do with Argentina, but in a completely no way literal way. It's the song of an exile, and when you're in exile, you only remember the good things of any place. It's just an allegory. But yeah. No, that Martian landscape, I was very touched because we had a complete rapprochement with Pete relatively recently when I was doing the House of X stuff. Maybe we were still called X UFO at the time, I don't know. And Pete came out and came up on stage with us, and he was lovely, and he picked up the mic and he said, and he introduced me, and he said, Danny Peyronel, who wrote some of the best songs that UFO ever did. Martian Landscape was the first one that he mentioned, of course, which was such a lovely thing to say. And I'm so happy. Not happy that he's gone, but I'm happy that before he went, we got so close again, which is lovely.
Yeah, did the band appreciate the song at the time? Was it because it's so different, wasn't it? Ending the album like that. Usually, think most rock bands think last track, side 2, right? Let's just turn everything up. But it works perfectly. Did they just because it was so different to what they'd done before?
I don't know if they appreciated it. There certainly wasn't the slightest notion of doing it live, so I really can't tell you. I can't remember that. But it's funny because Howard was also saying that he spoke to Andy and that talking about my songwriting, that Andy mentioned to him how refreshing he thought it was during that album that we were doing some songs that were pretty much completely finished before going, because you know how Phil writes the lyrics in the studio.
The last minute, yeah.
So he thought it was so refreshing. He never told me this, but he thought it was so refreshing that they were actually finished songs.
Yeah. And that must have been the same with Highway Lady, because that actually sounds like a typical UFO song. Did you, when you wrote that, were you thinking of the band, or was it again just a standalone song you'd written for a while?
No. Nothing I wrote for UFO was standalone. Everything I wrote for UFO was for the band, was thinking of the band. That's why, and that's why I was so upset when it all came to an end, because I already had some ideas
for the next album,
and I was all excited, and I spoke to Pete, and I said, Pete, why don't we start in rehearsals again? Some great ideas. You're going to love them. And he was strangely not cold, but strangely quiet in this phone call, I remember. And it was because already he knew that they were going to get rid of me. And then I got a call. Nobody had the balls to actually tell me directly. I got a call from this gray, eminence gris, gray eminence who passed as the manager. I say passed because the guy worked for the record company. He worked. He had a position at Chrysalis, and he was actually managing the band. Talk about conflict of interest, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And he was really very crafty and quiet and dark and so on. And he called me to tell me they decided that. That they should go in a different direction. I can't remember the words he put. I hope that he didn't say that they had all had a meeting and decided to go in a different direction, because that is exactly the opposite of what happened, right? Because they went exactly in the direction of the songwriting that we started together. Yes. It just grew more, which is bizarre. But as we now know, I'm sure you know, the reasons for my departure were nothing to do with the music or my playing or anything, but with a record company, and the same for Leo. Leo was the other scapegoat. Yeah. It was Leo and the new kid. But I'm sure you know that it was all to do with the record company and how they completely screwed everything up by changing American distributors just before the release of the album that they were hoping, quite convinced, was going to be the big UFO album, was No Heavy Betting. And of course, they changed distributors, and we were working like mad, all this touring and all these gigs where we were going down great. And when the kids went to Tower Records or whatever, no albums.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah. He did. I think one of the part of the new release. I think it's a double album or triple album. I think if it's vinyl, it includes a recording from the USA, doesn't it? I think is it from the USA with you?
No, I think it's
was it the Roundhouse? The Roundhouse. Sorry, yes.
Yeah. But it's the Roundhouse. The USA one, funny to mention it, is going to come out as well. From a different company called Cleopatra Records.
Oh yeah, I know that.
They just Peter, who's the band's manager, this German guy, Peter Norn. He has been in touch with me and the other guys. They're putting out a box set as well, and they were going to put. Funnily enough, they were going to put the Roundhouse one on, and just in the last minute, he emailed me that they realized it's coming out in the Chrysalis set. So would we mind if they replace it with an American, some American show? I don't know which. The Star would, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Which is pretty much the same songs. So Peter said, it sounds to me like the same thing. So shall we go? I said, yeah, fine, go. So that's going to come out anyway, a different box set. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, how do you, when you look back at the album now, what are your feelings towards it on its 45th anniversary? Almost.
I still like it. One of the songs that I co-wrote, which I like the most, funnily enough, is not the one that everyone picks.
On With the Action, is it?
Yeah, On With the Action. On With the Action was so different, I thought. I mean, it's very interesting. And I also remember the exact moment when we wrote it, which is a weird thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, other than Can You Roller, because that was a rehearsal.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but this was in the dressing room of a club we were doing in San Francisco. And I have a photograph of that moment of me at the Wurlitzer and Schenker here and Phil's here. And Schenker had come up with this riff, and I started doing these chords to go with it and so on. That's how it happened. Yeah.
That is a great song, and as Phil Mogg was very different for his vocals, his lyrics as well. They're very like aimed at the street, weren't they? Very observational, social kind of commentary, really. Yeah, it's an excellent song.
It is. I think it's quite different. It's very bluesy, isn't it? Very R&B, which so many people, when people who don't know UFO ask me, what I did, or they know a little bit, I mentioned UFO and so on and so forth. I have to remind them that UFO was not at all a heavy metal band, of course. We were very much in that British R&B, hard rock R&B.
Yeah, melodic rock, really. Yeah, very melodic.
We belonged more to the Free, Bad Company, Zeppelin thing, didn't we?
Yes, definitely.
Sabbath or anything like that. Very much. I mean, Phil is a great blues singer, really.
Yes, he is. I totally agree. Yeah, very underrated.
And he's gotten better with time. I at the time I thought he was all right, but the recent things that I heard, I like even more.
Yeah, fantastic.
Deeper,
Yeah, fantastic. So you then found yourself, without a band, probably for just a tiny while. The next thing you did was your own band, wasn't it? Was that with backing of managers or record labels, or just think, right, I'm going to do this? And that's a Blue Max, was it?
Yeah, that was a very unfortunate time because it was the height of the punky poo era, the punky poo days. So you really couldn't get a good gig or anything unless you were in that new line, and mine was a pretty traditional kind of hard rock band, a bit poppier but hard rock. It took us a long time. We rehearsed like almost a whole year without actually doing any gigs, and then we got a gig. Then we got a record deal with Charisma. And the problem we suffered was that we had been rehearsing so long and not really gigging that we had lost a lot of the soul of it,
the spark. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though it was a great band, great players, the guitarist went on to, here's an ironic twist of fate. This album that you're talking about, that's coming out now, the super deluxe edition, with vinyls and 2 CDs, belongs to and has been released by the guitarist in the Blue Max. Because Robin Miller was the guitarist, and he then went on to buy what was Morgan Studios, where we turned it into the Power Plant, I think it was called, and he discovered Sade, you see, and he produced the first 2 Sade albums, so a lot of record sales and so on.
Yeah, of course,
and fairly recently, he bought the Chrysalis catalog, you see. He bought Chrysalis Music, and his company...
Wow.
Yeah, his company's called Blue Raincoat Music, I believe. And Blue Raincoat, if you look it up, has Chrysalis. And funnily enough, where they have the axe, I only went the other day to look at it because somebody mentioned it.
Yeah.
It is Robin. So I went to look at the site, and in the artist roster of Chrysalis, the UFO one has a picture with my lineup in it.
Excellent.
I'm sure it must have been Robin who said, I'll put one with Danny. So is that weird?
Yes, yeah. Which it shows you just how connected everything is.
I know.
Amazing coincidence.
Very
you then got into songwriting. And one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, Meatloaf, who was joined at the hip for a while with Jim Steinman, obviously found through various reasons they kind of fell out, and he found himself with this album he needed to finish. How did you get in contact with him, or did someone put you in touch with him?
Well, I had a very good friend in America called Winston Simone, who was a manager, who... the last thing I heard of him, he was Desmond Child's manager. So he did pretty well eventually, but at the time he was just starting out, and he was managing Jan and Dean, believe it or not, the surf band.
The surf duo, yeah.
And he, I don't know how he knew this drummer called Joe Stefko, who was Meatloaf's drummer, you see, and he played him my stuff. So Joe really loved my stuff and everything. So he came to England. He came to England with Ellen Foley.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
She's the one who sings on Bat of the Hell.
Yeah, that's right.
Lovely girl. So he came with her and doing some gigs and stuff. We met up. I went over to New York, and we started rehearsing an idea of our own. And he said, let's go to see Meat in Connecticut at his home, because some of your stuff could be good. And so he took me to his house, and I played him a few of my songs. And Meatloaf went mental. He went, I want the whole album. I want to do the whole album of your stuff. I love it. I love it.
Wow.
And he gave me 2 titles. He didn't write, but he said, I don't write, but I have 2. I think good ideas for titles. Yeah. And one of them was Midnight at the Lost and Found, and the other one was Heaven's in a Chevy Tonight. Midnight, I wrote like the next day, right?
Oh wow!
And it ended up being the only song I wrote in the album because Meat went with Tom Dowd as producer, and Tom said, this song is all right, but all Danny's other stuff, it sounds too much like Meatloaf, and you need to sound like Bob Seger.
God.
Yeah, which you need to sing really well to sound like Bob Seger, Yeah. So anyway, so that's why it ended up as the only one. But there was Islamic Justice in this, in that they released 2 singles, nothing happened, and then they released Midnight, and it was the only hit out of the album. But anyway, the funny little story with the other song, which I could not get something happening with it, is that earlier this year, I went to my sister's in Florida, and I woke up at 5 a.m. in her house, and there was a keyboard there, and I wrote Heaven's in a Chevy Tonight. And that night, complete, I had it all in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm recording it now, and it sounds so Meatloaf. I can't tell you. It's going to be a little homage in my new album.
Fantastic. Did that then open the door to kind of do more songwriting? I know you were also wrote the words to Fear, which was included in Sade's second album. Is that? Yeah.
And I also wrote a song that Gilmour sang on Aston and Fenn's album. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Profiles. And
I wrote. There was only 2 songs with vocals. One I sing. Yeah. That's the one I had written originally, the Israel that I sing. The other one was my mate is Rick Fenner's my friend from that group.
Yeah.
And Rick was working from 10cc, and he was working with Nick. So that was during the recording of the first Tarzan album at Jimmy Soul Studios.
Yeah.
And so I went in and I sang Israel. And then I was going back home to I did everything in that now that I think of it, because Sade phoned me to that same session of doing the Tarzan album, and I wrote those lyrics for her. I said, call me in 15 minutes, I'll have something. And I wrote and I did that vocal. And then just before going back to the airport, we were going back to Madrid where we were living at the time, Rick phones me up desperate that Gilmour thought the words to the other song were horrible and he would not sing them. So he said, please, Dan, please, you got to write something. So I said, call me in 4 hours, call me at midnight at Madrid time. I have something. And he did. I wrote those words, and the next day Gilmour sang them, which is so great. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, anything else that I'd done was all right, but when I heard the first words with that, that way that Gilmour has, dropping the end of the word, and it's Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, and it's your words. Wow, that was my big moment.
But the band Tarzan also had they did quite well, didn't they? You were signed to Atco Records and toured America and with Twisted Sister and all over the place.
That's right, yeah, and we did a lot of South American stuff too, which was interesting. I'd never played in South America, even though I technically from that. That was my easily my favorite band ever was Tarzan. That especially that first proper lineup, because I'd really become friends with this Spanish guitarist called Salvador, and he was everything that I always had wanted in the guitarist when we were in the Heavy Metal Kids. Not the UFO because of the guitar, but any other band, you were always looking for the perfect guitarist. For me, he had to have good rhythm, the melody, sing. Mm-hmm. Salvador had everything, and the band just gelled. And we had Ralph Hood from Grand Prix. On bass, and he sang as well. My brother on drums. Everyone sang. It was my favorite band. My favorite. It's just a shame that I'm sure you know perfectly well. You need so many little factors to work.
Yeah, to join together. All the planets need to be in alignment, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
And at some point around this time you moved to Los Angeles and started to do more collaborating with songwriting?
Yeah, I did that in 1990, 91. I moved there. Again, that guy that I told you, my friend Winston Simone, he said he was saying to me, you are my other favorite songwriter, because Desmond was his client, and Desmond had by now sold about 50 million records, between Bon Jovi and Kiss and Aerosmith and Cher, whatever. So he said, you're my other favorite songwriter. You got to move to the States so you can work and then work with Desmond and stuff. But I wasn't that kind of songwriter. You see, I can't write songs like making sausages in a factory. You see, for me, it's not the same thing. I just can't do it like that, like a mechanical.
Yeah.
I just write when I get the inspiration, and if somebody happens to ask me and I'm inspired, great, but I just couldn't do it the American way, You know what I mean?
Yeah,
somebody coming up and say, "Yeah, I like the song, but if you could change this," no problem, I'll change it. No, I can't do that. So yeah, I didn't do that. I mean, I admire the great American songwriters. I admire Burt Bacharach and people like that. Wonderful. It's a different era, but in rock, it's
yeah, because in America they've got people like Desmond Child, there's Diane Warren, Holly Knight, isn't there? All these people that just kind of write them, as you say, like to order.
Yeah.
Off a menu.
I just don't get that. Yeah. I don't get that. And hey, hats off. What you do, Desmond and Diana, is really well done.
It is. Yeah, it's good.
You can't knock it. I just can't do that, And it's all these tricks. Desmond said to me, what you're gonna do, Danny, is you're gonna pick some song that you really like, and then you're gonna copy it exactly, right? But just change a couple of bits. I can't do that.
Yeah, just change it. Yeah, just change the middle eight. Yeah, be fine. Yeah. So after that, I think you went back to Italy, and then you worked on your first solo album.
Yeah. Well, I had a period there where I rediscovered my Italian roots, and I became an opera singer. I sang as a tenor.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I trained, and I'd never trained vocally before. I trained with some really big opera stars that were teaching at the time in New York, this was. And I completely rediscovered my roots. I assimilated the entire Italian opera repertoire.
Wow.
And I sang professionally very, very little. I mean, I did 3 or 4 things, but it was wonderful fun and wonderful self-assuring thing,
That's amazing. So, did that tempt you to kind of pivot into a different direction, or
it did? Yeah. But the problem was, it was very tough, and obviously as a medium, and maybe being, as I was already nearly 40 at the time, it was a bit late for me. If I had started earlier, I probably could have had a career, but it was a little late. And if you think the music world is very gossipy and full of this and that, that you want to. You don't want to know what the opera world is like. I mean, and the problem is that I came from the world, musically speaking, in as far as records was concerned, that paid for the opera thing, because it was pop music and rock music and so on that allowed record companies to make opera records.
Yes, of course, because it's very niche. Yeah.
Very niche. They sell nothing. I mean, I couldn't believe it. A Placido Domingo record of an opera, not the pop stuff, they did. Yeah. The tenors was different, all that is different.
Yeah.
But the actual opera, an opera record of Placido Domingo or Pavarotti or whatever at the time, which were the top stars.
Yeah.
Sold maybe 12, 14,000. If you sold that as a rock band, the record company would drop you immediately.
Yeah.
At the time. I mean, we sold more than that with our first Heavy Metal Kids album, which allowed you to make a new one. But in opera, that's normal, selling that kind of numbers. I know it's mental. So it's just a prestige thing, like you say, know. And of course, you've got to take into account how much it costs to make those albums, because you have 100 guys playing.
Exactly.
In a huge place. It's totally not a commercial proposition. So they thought they really have airs anyway in the world of opera. And I was thinking, come on, pay for what you're doing. I'm paying, right? You shouldn't be so arrogant. Anyway, but it doesn't matter. I enjoyed it. I'm very happy that I got the chance to do it. It's tremendous, and I met some great people, and I learned a lot with this with the singing thing. That's helped me a lot further.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, but you, again, correct me if I've got my timing wrong here, but you went from learning opera and obviously, and then you put together another version of the Heavy Metal Kids. Is that?
Yeah. First, I did the solo album. I did Make the Monkey Dance.
And that album had got versions of Highway Lady on it, and the Meatloaf track. Yeah.
That's right, yeah. And that I did in Italy, which initially we moved to Italy both because, again, the love affair with my roots and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And also because I wanted to maybe stay within the opera thing. And then, as it typically happens, you meet people and they go, oh, you're Danny from UFO, right? And all this. And, of course, musicians in Italy there are terrific musicians, as you can imagine. Music is everything in Italy. So I found these guys really easily who were kind of fans of mine. And so they had a studio, and one thing that they especially Marco Baruso, who's a tremendous guitarist. He ended up playing on the album as well, and he produced the Heavy Metal Kids album.
Yeah.
He's the one that said, well, why don't you do a solo? You've got to do a solo album. I've got these players, and he put me together with the musicians and stuff, and the sound was terrific. And then Ronnie had come for a holiday, and he said, why don't we do a kids album? And that's how the kids album came about. And it really was the album that we had always wanted to do in the old days and never could.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Because the kids were very much a live band, you see.
Yeah.
They were difficult to record the right way and produce the same effect. Well, Marco got it in one. I mean, that if you listen to it, it's really powerful. Gary would have been so pleased. That's what we always had wanted to do, And it was great fun.
And you took a tour of the USA to coincide with a major reissue of that album as well, didn't you? 2011, I think it was re-released on Angel Air Records.
Yeah. But that I did. It was a small US thing. It was mostly Florida, and it's just a bit of a laugh. But yeah, it was nice to see that one still could do that. But of course, all the time it's more difficult, as you know.
So that brings us kind of up to date with the X UFO or House of X.
Yeah.
So which one is which, or are they both separate?
It started out as X. It's the same band, of course. It started out as X UFO because the original idea was to provide, just for fun, we thought there's so many tribute bands. Why don't we? We were in the band.
Exactly.
It would be a luxury tribute band. So we called it X UFO, and we were doing very much an alternative UFO set. We played a lot of the standards, and we played songs that they didn't play,
these
and songs that Lawrence wrote. In his period and stuff, which were really, really nice songs as well. So we thought, well, we're offering an alternative to that, and we were faster than UFO. Anyway, but apart from that, we thought it was going to be great. And the fans who came to see us, great. We did several festivals, went down really well, all that and stuff. But we were not expecting that. We did get a lot of stick from some quarters for saying, we're trying to profit. I'm sure you know how little profit there is in music in any case. But we were trying to to profit from the UFO thing, it was so funny. Some people even suggested we shouldn't use the name X UFO. Why not? So we kept going. But anyway, eventually we didn't know what was going to happen. We started writing songs of our own. So that's why we morphed into House of X, because it didn't seem worth it just keeping on with it. We still did a lot of UFO songs live, but we were doing about half of our own. And our idea was to develop like that, like our own band.
Yeah.
You know?
And is that still the idea? Is that, as you said at the start of the interview, that's still a live band? It's just on hold at the moment.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it. If we wanted to, or somebody wanted us, we would be there. We're still very much about. And I don't know if you heard about the House of X, where we did a very strange and interesting version of Martian Landscape in a very heavy way, much heavier than the original one. Is a nice little album, the House of X album. So we had the live one, which was under the name X UFO, and then House of X, which is a studio album. So we got those two things. Yeah, that still is an existing thing, but right now I'm concentrated on two things: my new solo album and my writing, which I've got 2 books ready.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one is called Midnight of the Lost and Found, and it's basically a memoir.
Oh, brilliant!
But it's with a twist. It's really quite interesting. Yeah, I think anyway, because a lot of the people that I met, during that story, not just in music, there's all the music part of my career is there, but also stuff like. My dad was an admiral, and when he retired, he was made ambassador, and so on and so forth. And at one point in Washington D.C., in the middle of a UFO tour, I went to visit him. For instance, this is in the book, and picked me up in a limo at the airport. And it wasn't his limo; it was this other guy with glasses and boarding. And he introduced me, and he said, "This is Bill. This is my son Danny," and the guy was asking me, "So the tour's going good? Yeah. You do Madison Square Gardens?" Well, actually, Felt Forum. It's a small room. It's like a 3,000 seater. Yeah. And he says, "Hey, still Madison Square Gardens. Well done, great." So he drops us off at my dad's hotel, and my dad says, "You know who that was, right?" I said, "Well, Bill. You told me it was Bill." "Well, that's Bill Colby. He's the head of the CIA."
Wow.
Yeah. And the guy was a legendary head of the CIA, because he later resigned and he spoke against some of the stuff that America had done here and there, and then died very mysteriously. So, yeah. So that's in the book, for instance, just to give you a taster.
Yeah, that sounds good. When do you planning for the book to be released?
Well, I'm still seeking a house, because I don't want to do a self-publishing thing. But I have a really good agent, so I'm still confident that he will get me a good house for it. But also I wrote a second one called 10 Pianos, which is much smaller and will probably end up being released first, because it's commercial. And each chapter is about a piano that I've owned since I was a little boy. Right? Yeah. So half of the chapter is about me and the piano, or the piano and I. And the other half of the chapter is a romanticized, fictionalized little story about either the previous owners or the maker of the piano.
Sounds marvelous. Yeah.
It's a charming little thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing a solo album here in Barcelona, which is just great fun.
And how far are you down the process of the new solo album? Are you still writing or recording?
Yeah, recording already. I've got about 7 tracks down. I'm doing a version of From Russia with Love. Oh. Do you remember that song?
Yeah, I do.
Which was written by Lionel Bart.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Tremendous song. Yeah, mine is very updated, very hard rocky. In fact, I plan to do a little pastiche video and put it out on YouTube before the album's finished. And then all the others are either brand new songs or some songs that I've been delving into my back catalog, and there was stuff there that never got recorded commercially, and not because they were no good, but for, there's a million reasons. It just wasn't space, like all the strings, like you say. Wasn't space or this or that or the other. And I played them. I've got a really great partner in this, who's a Catalan guitarist called David Pereira, and he is just tremendous. He is one of these guitarists who plays for the song,
Oh, yeah.
Like I do, everything is the song. And he is doing most of the recording with me. It's just excellent. And he was saying those tracks are just, they could be written now. So we've redone about so far about 3 or 4 of those old tracks, and like he says, you can't really tell they were written a long time ago. And it's lovely that they will see the light.
Yeah. Well, that's true, isn't it? Because if you wrote the song in 1974, but it was never released or recorded, it's basically brand new, isn't it? It's just
absolutely.
It's absolutely new.
Yeah. And many of them, not all of them, obviously, but these ones definitely have stood the test of time, and then some. We haven't even done much in the way of renovating, making them sound. No, we just recorded them properly. Which I'd only done demos type of thing.
Yeah.
And this kid is just so good, and the sound is just super. To think that you can do stuff like this now. We used to have to spend 150 quid an hour in the studio to record at a level which is probably not as good as we're doing ourselves.
Yeah. And you had to do it at 2:00 in the morning because that was the cheapest time to use the studio.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very different. When do you have a plan of when the album will be released?
I don't have a plan, but I have some people who want to do a whole kind of 360-degree thing with it, which I guess suits the times now, between either one of the books or part of one of the books, the album, and a little video thing. Also the recording of the Meatloaf one. It'll be interesting to put it on video and explain because because let me tell you, if Meat were alive, he would have wanted to do it now. It is so totally Meatloaf. So it's a bit of a shame, but I'm hoping to do it justice. And you let me know when you hear it.
I certainly will, Danny. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely a privilege to talk to you. And it sounds like you've got some really exciting projects on the horizon. Both books and the solo album. It sounds absolutely great. And of course, the reissue of No Heavy Petting, which is coming really, really soon.
I still have the poster.
Well, and what a great poster! And and Hypnosis' album cover, it's iconic. It's fantastic.
Do you know? We just to close. One or two little things. This is this wonderful thing about life. I got to tell you that I consider myself incredibly lucky to have lived that time in music. Obviously, I mean, how incredibly lucky. I'm sure you do too, to have lived that time.
To experience the music. Yeah.
We have all been incredibly lucky. So much wonderful stuff, but. Two things. The thing I wrote for Nick Mason and that Gilmour sang, those few minutes got me into every encyclopedia of Pink Floyd ever written. And the cover of the No Heavy Petting album, every book on covers,
it's in there. It's in there. It's in all of them. Yeah, and your picture's in there. Exactly. Yeah, it is. It's like ripples, isn't it? Just just ripples, just spread out.
It's totally that. It's totally that. And I want you to know I am so grateful for the life I've had the luck to have. It is incredible. Really, really lucky. And although I would have really loved to stay in the band, had it gone on for at least for another year or two or three, whatever, I'm in no way unhappy with how it unfolded, because it went in other directions which it may never have gone if that's very true. That's very true. Well, thanks again, Danny, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. So please keep me in touch with all your projects. Absolutely. I'd like you to, as soon as this is ready, we'll be in touch, and I'd love you to listen to it.
Well done. All right. Thank you very much.
Take care, Phil.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And a big thank you to my guest, Danny Peyronel. And wasn't that a fantastic conversation and interview? Please check out the website, nowspinning.co.uk, and make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes by subscribing either on YouTube or on Spotify or via the website itself, which is nowspinning.co.uk/podcast. And I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.